My name is Dr. Raoul McLaughlin, and my subject is the Roman economy, including trade beyond the imperial frontiers. I have published several books on this subject. I am a member of the Council of the Classical Association of Northern Ireland. The question is, did wealth from ancient India fund the Roman Empire? I have constructed an Eastern commercial revenue model for the Roman economy. I introduced and explained this in 3 books. Rome in the Distant East, published by Bloomsbury in 2010. The Roman Empire in the Indian Ocean, 2014. And The Roman Empire and the Silk Routes, 2016. Modern historians have estimated the expense costs of the Roman Empire using ancient information about pay rates, army size, and other outlays. It is calculated that the Roman government spent about 1,000 million sesterces per year on its essential costs. That is 1 billion sesterces. The main expense was the cost of maintaining about 30 legions, and up to 300,000 professional soldiers in full-time military service. It is estimated that up to half of Roman spending was on the military forces needed to defend and control the empire. This is understood, but how did the Romans raise the funds needed to pay these costs? In the time of the emperors, the Roman regime was heavily reliant on international trade. Pliny the Elder, who served in the advisory council of the Emperor Vespasian, reported that 100 million sesterces of bullion were exported from the Roman Empire every year to pay for products from Arabia, India, and China. This export figure represented about 1/10 of the finances needed to fund the entire Roman Empire. The Romans encouraged this trade because, in the short term, Eastern commerce created highly lucrative revenues for the imperial government. The geographer Strabo, who was an associate of the Roman governor of Egypt, provides further evidence for the scale of Eastern trade. While on a tour with the governor, Strabo learned that over 120 Roman ships were sailing every year from Egypt to India and beyond. Evidence for the value of the cargoes returning from these distant trade dealings is given in a legal contract known as the Musaris Papyrus. This document records that a single Indian cargo brought back aboard a Roman trade ship called the Hermopollon was valued at almost 9 million sesterces. A fleet of 120 Roman ships returning from India would feasibly have imported Eastern goods worth over 1 billion sesterces every year. That is 1,080 million sesterces. The Romans imposed a 25%, a quarter rate, import tax, called the tetarche, on all international goods crossing the imperial frontiers. So commerce on this scale must have raised at least 270 million sesterces for the Roman state every year. This is between a quarter and a third of the revenues Rome required to maintain its empire, sustain its prosperity, and to pay for the legions. This financial situation is confirmed by the surviving ancient evidence for Roman revenues. The total revenues of the Republican state in the mid-1st century BC were about 340 million sesterces per annum. When Julius Caesar conquered Gaul, he imposed tribute of about 40 million sesterces on the newly subdued territories. However, the greatest surge in imperial income came when the Emperor Augustus annexed Egypt, a realm which had produced revenues of over 300 million sesterces for the Ptolemaic kingdom. By adding these figures together, the total arrived at suggests that the Roman Empire must have been receiving over 680 million sesterces from its conquered territories. Additional income came from gold mines, which produced up to 90 million sesterces of bullion per annum during periods of peak production. During the 2nd century, the Romans also received up to 90 million sesterces from the overland trade passing through the Syrian city of Palmyra, which controlled a frontier route between Parthia and the Roman Empire. But it was Indian Ocean commerce that added the greatest total to Roman revenues. taxes imposed on international trade passing through Egypt added a further 270 million sesterces to the Egyptian revenues and raised the income of the Roman Empire to more than 1,000 million sesterces per year. The historian Josephus was a client of the Flavian emperors, and he confirms that Egypt provided annual revenues greater than 570 million sesterces for the Roman state. This evidence confirms the value of international commerce and the importance of Eastern economies such as Arabia, India, and China in sustaining Roman prosperity. To summarize, the Roman Empire needed its trade with Arabia, India, and China to pay for regime costs and crucial military infrastructure. Over a quarter, perhaps a third of the revenues received by Roman government came from taxing the large-scale international commerce that was conducted with Eastern economies. The following extracts confirm the importance of the Eastern commercial revenue model for the Roman economy and the recognition it is receiving from leading academic institutions. The model was introduced in my doctoral thesis at Queen's University Belfast in 2006. Roman exports to the East may have been subject to high export tax, 25%, and Roman exports of wealth worth 100 million sesterces would generate revenues worth 25 million sesterces per annum. Regarding imports, tetarche, the government removed goods worth about 2.3 million sesterces from a total cargo worth about 9.2 million sesterces. This reconstruction suggests that the state seized possession of total cargo or taxes worth perhaps 276 million sesterces per annum, 2.3 million sesterces, multiplied by 120 ships. Also, if subject to a Pretoria rate of 1/40th, Indian imports worth 828 million sesterces would generate revenues of 21 million sesterces. Consequently, with the assistance of local garrisons, a relatively small number of state officials stationed in Egypt could bring in a third of the empire's total revenues. These ideas were expanded in my monograph, Rome and the Distant East, published by Bloomsbury in 2010. In addition to export taxes worth over 25 million sesterces, returning Eastern imports worth over 1,080 million sesterces would have raised a further 270 million sesterces for the state. In total, the eastern frontier taxes of Egypt would therefore have generated over 300 million sesterces per annum. Eastern goods exported from Alexandria into the Mediterranean were subject to further custom taxes called Pretoria, which were generally set at the comparatively low rate of about 1/40th value. This tax must have added tens of millions to Roman revenues received from Egypt. Consequently, a third of the imperial finances were therefore funded by the profits of Eastern trade. The Eastern commercial revenue model was further explained in McLaughlin, The Roman Empire and the Indian Ocean, 2014. It is possible that total Roman exports from Egypt to India, including goods and bullion, were valued at more than 100 million sesterces and produced more than 25 million sesterces of revenue. This is because Han texts suggest a tenfold price difference between Roman exports to India, 100 million sesterces, and Indian imports, 1,000 million sesterces. Also, a quarter-rate tetarche tax on Indian imports worth 1,000 million sesterces would have raised annual revenues worth 250 million sesterces for the Roman regime. Furthermore, in Alexandria, a single Mediterranean Pretoria tax, 1/40th, on goods worth 1,000 million sesterces would have produced further revenues worth perhaps 25 million sesterces per annum. In conclusion, the ancient evidence suggests that international commerce supplied the Roman government with up to a third of the revenues that sustained their empire.
Professor Wilson of Oxford University, head of the Oxford Roman Economy Project, said in the Cambridge Companion to the Roman Economy in 2014, the Muzarit's papyrus of the 2nd century CE gives a customs assessment of part of the cargo imported from Muzaris to Berenike, valuing the cargo after customs duties at nearly 7 million sesterces. The state's revenue on this one cargo was thus about 2.2 million sesterces. He went on, with 100 such cargoes a year, a conservative estimate, as Strabo a century before speaks of 120 ships a year leaving Myos Hormuz for India, the customs revenue on the import trade alone through the Red Sea would have amounted to perhaps between a quarter and a third of the entire military budget for the empire. Professor Wilson, in 2015, said in Across the Ocean, 9 essays on Indo-Mediterranean trade, the well-known 2nd century Muzaris papyrus, which values the cargo of the ship Hermopollon with a cargo from India at 1,151 talents, 5,852 drachma of silver, which is equivalent to 6,009,011,852 sesterces. If there were only 100 such cargoes per year, almost certainly an underestimate, over 100 years earlier, Strabo speaks of 120 ships per year leaving Myos Hormuz for India. The customs revenues from the imports from India alone would amount to some 230 million sesterces, or 1/3 of Duncan Jones' estimate for the total annual cost of the army in the 2nd century. Professor Wilson went on to say, it looks as if the total state revenue for the empire may have been significantly underestimated by not taking due account of the revenues from trade, especially Indo-Mediterranean trade. Professors Wilson and Bowman, Oxford University, Oxford Roman Economy Project, said in Trade, Commerce and the State in the Roman World in 2017, we will probably not overestimate state revenue if we calculate 100 ships per year. With a similar tax revenue per cargo, this would yield 230 million sestertii per year as import dues alone, not counting export dues on those 100 ships on their outward voyage, or interprovincial custom dues on that part of the imports that was not consumed within Egypt, but was traded on to other provinces. This makes it very possible that something like 1/3 of the state's military budget, as estimated by Duncan Jones at 643 to 704 million sestertii, could have been met from the custom revenues on the Red Sea trade alone.
For further information on the Eastern Commercial Revenue Model, subscribe to my channel and follow the links to my books. Rome and the Distant East, published by Bloomsbury in 2010. The Roman Empire and the Indian Ocean, 2014. And The Roman Empire and the Silk Routes, 2016. Thank you.